Уважаемые друзья, тема моего выступления – ситуация на Донбассе и ход специальной военной операции по его освобождению от неонацистского режима.
Currently, we are witnessing hundreds of thousands of Russians, mainly young men, who are leaving their home country rather than the possibility of losing their life, fighting in a conflict which has nothing to do with them. There have been far more who have fled the country than those who theoretically are supposed to be mobilised to fight in Putin's war of aggression, which in turn is based on a historical fantasy of empire. However, as far as Putin is concerned, the former loyal servant of the communist regime and KGB Lt Colonel, the flow of people out has a number of advantages. First of all, it increases terror inside the country and makes people choose. Do they want to leave and potentially lose everything they own, or do they want to stay and fight and potentially lose their lives in a struggle to increase Putin's ego and his bank balance? It means he's getting rid of potential opponents and therefore strengthening his base. As far as Putin is concerned, the mass flight out is clearly cheaper and easier than killing or imprisoning potential opponents. Furthermore, he is causing problems for the countries where they go as Putin seeks to cause tensions within the host countries, some parts of the community of which may turn with hostile intent on the Russian refugees. Thus, he has the benefit of destabilising other countries and point to anti-Russian feelings in those countries, stirred up by the mass wave of immigration to strengthen his nationalist base at home. Just look at how they treat Russians in their country. This behaviour is nothing new and has been part of the communist playbook for many years. In communist countries, the aim was always to get rid of what they would call the troublemaking element. For example, as from 1977, the communist political police in Czechoslovakia carried out a campaign to force dissidents to leave the country. This operation was called cleaning the septic tank. The most famous action of all was that carried out in Cuba by Fidel Castro. In the spring of 1980, he announced that he was removing the guards at the Peruvian embassy in Havana, which in a few days resulted in the entry of around 10,000 people. However, a far larger wave of emigration came in the next few months. More than 100,000 people reached Florida on ships delivered by the Cuban diaspora from the United States on hastily assembled barges. Castro not only got rid of his political opponents, but filled the ships with criminals and those with psychiatric and other problems. Whereas the 1983 film by Brian De Palma, Scarface, is fictitious. It very clearly shows what communist dictatorships can achieve by exporting not only their political opponents, but also their criminal element and those with mental health issues. I'm now in Poland, and here in March 1982, the Communist Security Police, SB, Służba Bezpieczeństwa, began the action of persuading internees to emigrate. Following the declaration of martial law in December 1981, thousands of people opposed to the communist rule were arrested. This idea of forcing people to leave had been considered by the Polish leadership earlier. Wojciech Jaruzelski, head of the Polish Communist Party, had discussed the idea with General Czesław Cislak, then a member of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, and within a few months to be one of the organisers of martial law. In 1981, the ambassador of the Polish People's Republic in Washington probed the reaction of Zbigniew Brzezinski, who had been the United States National Security Advisor to Jimmy Carter and was still influential during the presidency of Ronald Reagan. The idea was to suggest that some 50 to 70 major opposition figures be given the opportunity of a scholarship abroad. This was not implemented when the idea was brought up in March 1981, but after declaration of martial law, the situation was different. People were locked up and unsure of their fate, and thus were more inclined to emigrate. The official communist press reported that internees could leave at any time they wanted. General Jaruzelski, in a conversation with the Soviet Marshal Viktor Kulikov, lamented that Poland's geographical position did not make flight easy. It would be good if some of the thugs, as he called them, could flee to the west. It's a pity that we do not have common borders with the capitalist states. Let a few thousand run away, then it would be much easier for us. As a result, internees were faced with a dilemma, and they discussed it amongst themselves. The majority clearly saw no future in Poland. However, a second group, which appears to be the minority, thought that leaving would only strengthen the hand of the communist authorities, and therefore it would be an act of resistance to stay, albeit locked up. People who decided to emigrate were in fact given a one-way ticket and a passport giving the right to cross the border once. By the end of 1982, 1,387 interned people asked to leave, although only 921 passports were issued and 770 left, although they took with them 1,442 family members. The vast majority of those who left chose the United States as their destination, followed by Germany, followed by France. The authorities were relieved to get rid of what they considered the hostile element, and as promised, almost all travel applications were processed positively, quickly, and efficiently. Data from the Passport Office of the Ministry of the Interior indicates that 96% positive decisions were made for those who were interned. Very few, thus, had to stay in the country. So what did this mean to the opposition? The loss of just over 2,000 people in a country of well over 35 million inhabitants didn't mean that much as far as a population's concerned, but 770 of them had been organisers of the anti-communist opposition in major factories, and thus this appears to have had a big effect on demoralising those left behind, particularly after the internees who did not leave started to be released from prison. To be released from prison, of course, they had to promise to obey Polish law, which was a condition of release, and this in effect meant that they couldn't get involved in anything political, which of course would include things like organising strikes, go-slows, and the likes. In the case of Poland, the amount of people who left at this time was quite small, especially if you compare it to the amount of people who left seeking work in other countries of the European Union after 2004. However, and this is the important thing, the people who were forced to leave or left rather than be locked up were the organisers of the opposition. This did not do the communists much good in Poland, of course, because their regime was overthrown within a few years, although admittedly this is due to events in other countries, above all in the Soviet Union and Mikhail Gorbachev. However, the story in Cuba has been completely the opposite. Castro got rid of his opponents, as well as a large amount of common criminals, and his regime is still in power 42 years later, even if he mightn't be, because he's dead. As far as Putin is concerned, the amount of the population leaving is much greater in percentage terms than even Castro faced, suggesting that he's likely to face even fewer street protests. Now, the question is, what do you think? Should political immigrants be allowed to enter a host country, or should they stay and fight against the dictatorship? This is now a very important issue, and I will leave you to ponder that one. I hope you found this interesting. I upload every Friday at 2000 hours Central European time, and I cover large 20th century history. Okay, my specialization is in the Nazi period above all, and that within that the Holocaust. But as you see, I also do things related to the communist and Putin dictatorships in modern times. So if you want to know when I'm uploading, then please subscribe and press the bell. All the best from me in Wrocław, Poland.